Hello students, welcome to this session. Today I will explain you the first lesson of standard 8, the best Christmas present in the world. Before explaining the chapter, I would like to introduce you the character of the story. The characters are Michael Morpurgo. Michael Morpurgo is the writer of the story as well as he is playing the main important role in the story. Jim McPherson. Jim McPherson who write a letter. Connie McPherson. Connie McPherson is a wife of Jim McPherson. Fritz. It is a German name. Just like we call common name, the nickname, the person name we don't know. That time in German they call Fritz. And the Tommy. This is an English name which is calling here to the English British soldiers. Okay, let's start the first part of the story. I spotted it in a junk shop in Bridport. Spotted it means found it. The meaning of spotted it is found it. I found it in a junk shop in Bridport, a roll-top desk. Here I is Michael Morpurgo. He found a roll-top desk in Bridport in a junk shop. The man said it was early 19th century and oak. I had wanted one, but they were far too expensive. The writer wanted one roll-top desk, but it was too expensive because it was made from oak. Oak is the tree wood which is we use to make the furniture and seats and all. This was in a bad condition. The roll-top in several pieces, one leg clumsily mended, scorch marks all down one side. He is telling that the roll-top desk was clumsily mended, means it was awkward mended and it was in a bad condition. There were scorch marks means burn marks. There were burn marks on the table. One leg clumsily mended, scorch marks all down one side. It was going for very little money. I thought I could restore it. I thought I could restore means repair it. Restore means repair. And it would be a risk, a challenge, but I had to have it. I paid the man and brought it back to my workroom at the back of the garage. I began work on it on Christmas Eve. In this paragraph, the writer is saying that he purchased a roll-top desk which was not good in condition, but then also he purchased it and bought it at home, and on the Christmas Eve he started to work on it. The next paragraph is, I removed the roll-top completely and pulled out the drawers. Actually the roll-top desk is, he removed the upper part and there were the drawers. The veneer means a thin layer of plastic or decorative wood on the furniture. A veneer had lifted almost everywhere. The veneer was lifted almost everywhere and it looked like water damage to me. The desk was completely burned and we can also find the marks of water on it. It means that both fire and work has clearly taken their toll on this desk. Taken their toll means damaged. Means the fire and the water totally damaged the roll-top desk. The last drawer was stuck fast. I tried all I could to ease it out gently. In the end, I used my brute force. I struck it sharply with the side of my fist, and the drawer flew open to reveal a shallow space underneath, a secret drawer. When the writer tried to take out the drawer, then he used his brute power to open it, and then finally it came out and there he found a secret drawer. There was something in there. I reached in and took out a small black tin box. It is sellotaped to the top of it was a piece of lined note paper and written on it in a shaky handwriting. When the writer opened the drawer, that time he found a tin box in it, and then there was a piece of paper with a shaky handwriting. It was written and it was sellotaped nicely on the tin box. Now what was written in the paper? There was a note. Jim's last letter received January 25, 1915. It was written by Jim's wife Connie. She wrote that it was the letter of Jim, it was the last letter of Jim, and she received this letter on January 25, 1915. He buried with me when the times come. I knew as I did it that it was wrong of me to open the box, but curiosity got the better of my scruples. It usually does. Generally, when we see the things and somebody told us not to open the box, at that time we are more eager to open it. So when he saw the box and that was written that when this box was buried with me when she died, that time curiosity was there and in my mind, and I tried to open the box. Inside the box there was an envelope. The address read, Mrs. Jim McPherson, 12 Copper Beaches, Bridport, Dorset. I took out the letter and unfolded it. It was written in pencil and dated at the top December 26, 1914. So when the writer opened the tin box, there was an envelope. The address was written on it and it was the Jim's house address. Now what was written in the letter that was given in part 2 that I am reading. Dearest Connie, I write to you in much happier frame of mind because something wonderful has happened to me and that I must tell you about at once. We were all standing in our trenches yesterday morning, Christmas morning. It was crisp and quiet all about. As beautiful a morning as I have ever seen, as old and frosty as a Christmas morning should be. Here the Jim is writing a letter to his wife Connie, and very first he is telling about the weather on the Christmas day. Generally it was frosty and the morning was very crisp, and all the armed soldiers were standing in our trenches. They were standing in their trenches in that morning. The meaning of trenches is long deep ditches in the ground where the soldiers hide themselves. So they were all in trenches and the morning was very beautiful. In the next paragraph, the writer is saying, I should like to be able to tell you that we began it, but the truth I am ashamed to say is that Fritz began it. First someone saw a white flag waving from the trenches opposite. The one German soldier was waving a white flag opposite to the trenches, and then they were calling out to us from across no man's land. No man's land means there is no owner of that land. So they were calling, the German were calling us from the opposite side and they were waving a white flag. Happy Christmas, Tommy, Happy Christmas. They did not know our name, and I said is that the Tommy is the general English name. So they were calling that Happy Christmas, Tommy, Happy Christmas. When we had got over the surprise, same of us shouted back, same to you Fritz, same to you. Out of this, when we are going to tell them anything else, till then one from our side also wished him Happy Christmas. I thought that would be that, we all did, but then suddenly one of them was up there in his great coat and waving a white flag. Don't shoot lads, lads means men, boy, don't shoot boy. Someone shouted and no one did, and no one shoot them because they were just passing the message of Happy Christmas to us. Then there was another Fritz up on the parapet and another say, keep your heads down. I told the men, it's a trick, but it wasn't. Then one Fritz stood up and said, it might be a trick, but it wasn't a trick. And one of the German was waving a bottle above his head. It's a Christmas day, Tommy. We have snaps, we have sausages, we meet you. Yes, by this time there were dozens of them walking towards us across no man's land and not a rifle between them. Now one soldier of German was waving a bottle and he was calling to the other soldier that we are having sausages, we are having snaps. So come on and let's join us. We meet you. We wanted to meet you. By this time there were dozens of them, means that from their side and from our side, dozens of soldiers were coming to each other to wish them. Come on boys, what are we waiting for? And then there was no stopping them. And then a little Private Morris was the first up and he called us that come on boys, what were we waiting for? Come on and let's celebrate the Christmas. And then there was no stopping them. I was the officer, I should have stopped them there and then. Because here the Jim is writing that as an officer I should stop them. But I didn't. I suppose, but the truth is that it never even occurred to me I should. All along their line and ours, I could see men walking slowly towards one another, grey coats, khaki coats, meeting in the middle. And I was one of them. So he was saying that in between there I could see that the person of khaki coats and grey coats were meeting to each other in the middle of the war, and I was there one of them. I was part of this. In the middle of the war we were making peace, and in the middle of the war we all were making peace over here because they all were celebrating Christmas Eve. Here they were fighting for their country, but now it was the Christmas day, so they all were wishing to each other and they were celebrating Christmas by forgetting everything. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feeling as I looked into the eyes of Fritz officer who approached me, hand outstretched, Hans Wolf. Here anybody can be shocked. Why? Because you just think that if your enemy is wishing you your birthday or the festival wishing he is giving you, then you will be shocked that what changes come to him. Here same happened with Jim. The Fritz officer was wishing him the happy Christmas and also he was introducing him. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, and that feeling he was telling to his wife Connie, that the feeling and you cannot imagine that time what I was feeling. Hans Wolf, he said, gripping my hand warmly and holding it. The Fritz hold my hand, and the name was Fritz Hans Wolf. Hans Wolf hold my hand and he said, I am from Dusseldorf, I play the cello in the orchestra, Happy Christmas. And then the Hans was wishing to him Happy Christmas and he introduced himself that he was from Dusseldorf and he was playing cello in the orchestra. Cello is one type of instrument which the person is played in the orchestra. Captain Jim McPherson, then it was the Jim turn to introduce himself. He said, I replied, and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. And he said that I am a school teacher and I am from England, from west of England. Oh Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum ration and his excellent sausage. And the person, the Fritz person, the Hans said that, really, I know that place very well. He was very well aware about this place. And that time what he did, they shared their rum ration. Rum ration means the liquid which they were getting, the inner some equal parts they were getting, the soldiers were getting during war. And his excellent sausage, they also celebrate their sausage. Sausage is one type of dish, German dish. And we talked, Connie, how we talked. He spoke almost perfect English. I was surprised. I means Jim. Jim was surprised that how could he speak so nicely English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset. And he also told me that he never came to Dorset. Never even been to England, but he had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His English was too good because he read so many books in English and from school he learned language. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there is no more man's land. He talked about Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Roy and Dorset. This was the famous person and the famous stories of relevant countries, German or British. So they were sharing to each other. They were telling to each other their country's famous stories. He had a wife and one son. Hans Wolf was having a wife and one son, born just 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land. Generally, they were all over, all soldiers were on no man's land. It was not a land of German and not a British. So they all were there. Smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating. Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Connie. Now the writer Jim is saying to his wife, then at last when I shared everything what was on your cake. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. The marzipan was a covering on a cake made from sugar, eggs and almonds. And that was made by Connie, and the person, the Jim, liked it too much. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. Obviously, because if the two enemies are celebrating a festival together, so it will be a different from other. So nobody can imagine that how two enemies can celebrate one festival together. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Great coats were dumped in piles to make goalposts, and the long heavy coat, great coats were the long heavy coat, they dumped means left as it is, and they make it goalpost. And the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Here were also Tommy and Fritz were against to each other. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands, stepping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything, because it was the cold day. So we did everything to keep out the cold, to feel the coldness, we did everything. There was a moment then when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim McPherson, he said, after a while I think there is how we should resolve this war, a football match. Now here the idea came to German's mind and in the Hans' mind. He said that I got an idea that how we can resolve from this condition. We should have football match instead of war. That is the best idea, that if we played football, then what will happen? No one dies in a football match, no children are orphaned, and no wives become widows. So if we played football instead of war, then no child will be orphaned, no wife will be widow. So this is the best idea to resolve the conflicts between the two countries. I would refer cricket. Here he was from England. The Jim was from England. So obviously he said that I would prefer cricket. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. We laughed at that and together we watched the game. Said to say Connie, Fritz won 2-1. Here who won? Fritz. But as Hans Wolf generally said, our goal was wider than theirs. We will won the match, and so it wasn't quite fair. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished. The snaps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he could see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. And finally, as the match over, they all went to their place and they wished to each other. He wished to Jim also, and the Jim wished to Hans that they would meet again soon, and they were hoping that they would meet to their family very soon. I think that is what every soldier wants on both sides. Hans Wolf said, "Take care, Jim McPherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you." He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. I felt he turned to wave just once and then become one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. And again I saw that hundred of the soldiers were again going to their trenches. Here their meeting was over. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. The song they were singing from their dugouts, it was Silent Night, Silent Night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of While Shepherd Watched. We were singing the song While Shepherd Watched, and they were singing Silent Night, Silent Night. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fell silent. We had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I will live. I will never, the Jim is saying that he would never forget the day which he was celebrating the Christmas Eve in between World War. Dearest Connie, my Christmas time next year, these war will be nothing but a distance and a terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon, I am sure of it. At last, the Jim was writing to his wife Connie that very soon we will meet, and I think that he said that he thought that by the time of next year we would be together. Here the end of the letter, and the part 3 started. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into the envelope. After reading the letter, the writer put again the envelope in the box. I kept awake all night. By morning I knew what I had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell. The roof gaping, the windows boarded up. The meaning of burned out means destroyed by fire. Boarded up means covered with wooden boards. What was happening? Whole night the writer was thinking about this letter, and till morning he was decided that now what he had to do. So he went to Bridport. So he went there and he said Copper Beaches was house number 12. He went to Bridport, Copper Beaches, house number 12. There he saw a boy with a dog and he asked the address. And when he reached there, he saw that the house was totally destroyed by fire. And the roof were gaping, the windows boarded up. Now I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of a Mrs. McPherson, because obviously the neighbor knew it very well that where the Mrs. McPherson was. So he asked to neighbor, and "Oh yes," and the neighbor replied that, "Oh yes," said the old man in his slippers. He knew her very well, a lovely old lady, he told me, a bit muddle-headed. Muddle-headed means confused. The person was confused. The lady was confused. Why she was confused in mind? Because she was 101 years old. The Connie was now 101 years old. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity. Connie used to use candles, not electricity, because she thought that electricity was too expensive. Because she always thought electricity was too expensive, because the fireman had got her out just in time. She was in a nursing home now, he told me. Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of town. Now the neighbor gave the address of Mrs. McPherson where she was. He said that now Mrs. McPherson was in a nursing home. Now I found Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in a hallway and a lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner. Obviously they all are also celebrating the Christmas Eve, because it was the Christmas time. And he saw that in a hall there were the chains of paper and a lighted Christmas tree stood in a corner with a lopsided means only one-sided angel on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. McPherson to bring her a Christmas present. He introduced himself. The writer here introduced himself that he came to give Christmas present to Connie. And I could see though into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron, the woman in charge, matron means woman in charge, had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. When the woman in charge saw me, she was enough happy. Why? Because she even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. Mrs. McPherson is not in with the others, she told me. She is rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. Remember, students, that it was the Christmas Eve, and today Connie was missing her husband Jim, because Jim promised him to come on the Christmas day. So today she was not well, so she was sitting in her room. So we did not disturb her. She has no family, no one visits here. So I am sure she will be only too pleased to see you. She took me into a conservatory room with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. The mentor took the writer to the Mrs. McPherson. The old man was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded her in her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. She was gazing out at the garden. "Hello," I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly, because she was 101 years old. So she was looking him vacantly. At that age, nobody can easily identify the person. "Happy Christmas, Connie," I went on. "I found this. I think this is yours." And now the writer said that I found this and I thought that this is yours. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. She was continuously gazing to the writer. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with a sudden glow of happiness. When I gave her an envelope, that time her face was lit up. Lit up means become bright with happiness, and her smile spread all over her face. The light of her face was spread all over her face. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. I was not thinking that she was listening me because she was continuously gazing me. For a while she said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. She took gently the letter from me. Suddenly she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest, she said, and here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim dear, sit down. When I gave her letter, then what happened? She was continuously gazing me, and then she took my hand and she told me to sit near her. She also said that, Jim, you told me that you would come on Christmas Day, and now today you came. So what can we think? That now Connie was thinking that her husband came to meet her. I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. Till now, the Connie was thinking that her husband came to meet her. And now she was saying that I read your letter every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me, because this was the feeling of wife. And now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Now you are giving me your letter. So I wanted that you read this letter yourself, because I liked to listen your voice. I would like that so much, and then perhaps we would have some tea. I would make you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan. So here the Connie is telling to Jim, means that actually that person was not Jim. He was the writer. But she thought that her husband came, so she was talking like her husband. She told that read a letter once from I want to hear your voice, and then we would have nice tea, and also I would make a cake to you, because I thought that you like, and because I think that you liked my cake and my marzipan. So students, in this story you will find three themes. Just like that one, that in between the war, World War I, when the German and the Britishers were against to each other, that time one troop of army were celebrating Christmas on no man's land, and even they thought that this was the best way to celebrate, to end the conflict of two nations, because in this we have no loss. No children will be orphaned, no wives will be widow. So these were the benefits, and no destruction will be there. So this was the best idea. But now on, the World War was continued with 1915, and that time it ended. And the letter was written by Jim to his wife Connie, and he was her about everything what was they did in the world in between World War. And then the writer thought that he should give this letter to Connie. So he found her and gave her his letter, and at last Connie thought that Jim came, and so she was celebrating Christmas with Jim. And here the writer didn't say anything else, because he did not want to hurt her. And she was 101 years old. So here the story was ended. One poem is also given, The Ant and the Cricket. The characters are ant and the cricket. This is a fable poem. Fable means in which the characters are always animal, and fable stories or fable poems always give a moral. In this story, the moral is that we should be prepared for our adverse time. We should be ready, We don't think that when the difficulty will come, that time we will face it. We should be prepared for every difficulty or every problems which we are going to face. Okay, so that main idea is given in this poem. A fable is a story often which animal as a character that conveys a moral. The fable stories always convey a moral. This poem about an ant and a cricket contains an idea for far-reaching significance, which is as true as for a four-legged cricket as of two-legged one. Here the two-legged one means human beings. This poem is also related to four-legged one, and also the two-legged one means the human beings also. Humans also have to prepare themselves for the adverse time. Surely you have seen a cricket that has two legs. We can say that here it is saying by an author that surely you have seen the cricket also that they are having two legs. A silly young cricket accustomed to sing through the warm sunny months of gay summer and spring began to complain when he found that at home his cupboard was empty and winter was come. Not a crumb to be found on the snow-covered ground, not a flower could he see, not a leaf on a tree. Oh, what will become, says the cricket, of me? Here the cricket is saying that a silly cricket, we can say that a silly cricket who used to sing whole day. So he is used to sing a song whole day through the warm sunny months of summer to spring, means the two seasons mixing. When the summer to spring the season, that time the summer is not too cold or not, it's warm. So that time the cricket used to sing a song whole day. Began to complain when he found that at home his cupboard was empty when winter was come, because generally in many countries you will see that in winter season you cannot see even the leaves on the tree. Everywhere the snow spreads. So that time for the creatures, for the small creatures, it was not easy to find a food. So here when the cricket found his cupboard was empty and there was not a single crumb. Crumb means a small piece of bread or biscuits was not in the cupboard. And the winter was come, not a crumb to be found on the snow covered ground. How it is possible? Because there was a snow on the ground, so it was not possible to find a single piece of bread. And not a flower could he see. He could not see the flower also, not a leaf on a tree. Oh, what will become, says the cricket, of me? Now the cricket was worried that what would be happened with him, because he was not having any food in the cupboard. At last by starvation and famine made bold, all dripping with wet and all trembling with cold, away he set off to a miserly ant to see if, to keep him alive, he would grant him shelter from rain and a mouthful of grain. He wished only to borrow, he would repay it tomorrow. If not, he must die of starvation and sorrow. Here the cricket is saying that if he will not, to suffer from no food, to die without no food, it is better to go to ant and ask him to give him a mouthful grain. Mouthful means food that you can put in your mouth. Okay, so he is saying that he could go to ant to ask him for shelter from rain, and he could also ask him for a mouthful grain. He wished only to borrow. He was wishing. Then he will only borrow, and tomorrow he will say that I would pay you again tomorrow. If not, he must die of starvation and sorrow. He said to ant that if you will not give me a mouthful grain or a shelter from rain, then I would starvation, I would die from no food. Without eating any food, I will be die. Says the ant to the cricket, I am your servant and your friend, but we ants never borrow, we ants never lend. Here the ants clearly denied to cricket, and they said that we and never borrow and never lend. We and are your servant and your friend also, but we and never borrow and never lend. But tell me, dear cricket, did you lend nothing by when the weather was warm? The ant asked that what did you do when the weather was warm? Quoth the cricket, not I. And the cricket said, quoth means said. The cricket said that I did not do anything else. My heart was light that I sang day and night. Here the cricket said that I was so light, I was so happy that I was only singing day and night. For all nature looked gay. You sang, sir, you say. He said that when the nature was, when the spring season was there, when the summer season was there, you said that you were only dancing, you were only singing. So now you sang, sir, you say. So now go then, says the ant, and dance the winter away. Now that time you sing the song, now it is the time that you dance, because you are not having anything else to eat. Thus ending, he hesitantly lifted the wicket. Thus ending, he hesitantly lifted the wicket, and out of the door turned the poor little cricket. Folks call this is a fable, I will warrant it true. Some crickets have 4 legs and some have 2. Now the ant told cricket to go away from there, and he hesitantly lifted his leg and turned back, but the ant were not ready to give him not a single crumb. Now the writer is saying that at the end, folks call this is a fable. Folks means many persons who believed that this is a fable. And I will warrant it true, and I am officially says that it is a true. I will officially say that it is true. It is a fable story which is giving us a message. Some crickets have 4 legs and some have 2. Means some crickets, few are having 4 legs, means animals, and some are having 2. And both should have to prepare for their adverse time. They should not think at a time. We should not be like a cricket, that when the problem came, when the season came, that time we will think that what will we do now? Okay, so we should be like ant. We should be hard working. We should be think for the good time and also for the bad time, and to be prepared for that adverse time. So here I end the poem, and have a nice day.